Get on your knees and clean them." My daughter-in-law dropped her mud-covered shoes right in front of me like she was tossing a pair of old work gloves onto the floor. I looked down at them, then at my right knee, the one that hadn't bent comfortably in years. For half a second, I honestly thought Brittany was joking. She wasn't. "They're limited edition," she said, "so don't mess them up." It was 8:12 on a Sunday morning in Carmel, Indiana, and I was standing in my son's kitchen holding a mug of coffee I hadn't even finished yet. Outside, the backyard was still wet from an overnight storm. Brittany had just come in through the garage after some early real estate event at a model home. Her cream-colored sneakers were streaked with brown mud almost to the laces. I stared at her. "You want me to clean your shoes?" She folded her arms. "I want you to be careful with them." I gave a small laugh because I still couldn't quite believe the conversation was real. "Then I'd be especially careful with them if I were you." That did not improve her mood. Her mouth tightened. "You live here for free, Linda. Make yourself useful." That was when I stopped smiling. I had been staying with Jason and Brittany for 11 weeks, but it hadn't started as some arrangement where I needed a place to live. In February, a pipe burst behind the wall in my little bungalow on the south side of Indianapolis. At first, I thought I'd be out of the house for maybe 10 days. Then the contractor found mold behind the drywall, the insurance company started asking for more estimates, and 10 days somehow became 2 months. Jason had been the one who insisted I stay with them. "Mom, don't spend $3,000 on some extended stay hotel," he told me. "We have the guest room. Come here." I resisted. I've always liked having my own space. At 61, you get used to knowing exactly where your coffee filters are and not having to ask anybody whether the washing machine is free. But Jason kept pushing, so eventually I packed a suitcase and came up to Carmel. At first it was fine, then little things started changing. The week before the shoe incident, Brittany had 2 women from work over after an open house. One of them started gathering wine glasses from the living room. Brittany waved her off. "Oh, leave them. Linda loves having something to do." Everybody laughed. I laughed too. Then I stood at the sink loading their glasses into the dishwasher, wondering why that little joke had bothered me so much. I told myself not to be sensitive. That was one of my specialties back then. Don't be sensitive, don't make things awkward, keep the peace. So when Brittany told me to get on my knees and clean her shoes, maybe something in me had finally run out. I set my coffee mug on the counter. "Clean your own shoes, Brittany." She blinked. "What?" "You heard me." That was when Jason walked in. He had on gray sweatpants and an old Colts t-shirt, his hair still flattened on one side from sleep. I looked at him. I didn't expect him to start screaming at his wife. I didn't even expect some big dramatic defense. I just expected my son to say, "Brittany, come on, that's enough." Instead, he looked from me to the shoes and sighed. "Mom, why do you always have to make everything into a thing?" I remember exactly how that felt. Not anger at first, more like confusion. Brittany pointed at me. "She owes me an apology." I stared at Jason. "You heard what she said to me." He rubbed a hand over his face. "Just apologize." "For what?" "For being disrespectful." I actually thought I'd misheard him. Then Brittany said, "And clean the shoes." Jason's jaw tightened. "Mom, obey my wife and apologize or get out." The kitchen went very still. Even the refrigerator seemed loud. I looked at my son for a long moment. He didn't take it back. So I nodded. "Okay." Brittany gave me this little satisfied look. She thought I meant, "Okay, I'll apologize." I didn't. I walked upstairs. I pulled Frank's old Navy Samsonite suitcase from the back of the guest room closet. My husband had used that thing for every road trip we took for 20 years. One wheel squeaked and the zipper always caught near the corner. I packed 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, underwear, my blood pressure pills, a toothbrush, and the paperback I'd been reading. I didn't pack much because I honestly didn't know where I was going. Halfway down the stairs, my granddaughter Sophie came out of her bedroom. She was 8 then, wearing pink pajamas with little stars on them. "Grandma?" I stopped. "What is it, sweetheart?" She looked at the suitcase. "Are you going home?" That almost did me in. I crouched as far as my knee allowed and kissed her forehead. "Soon, just not today." Are you coming back?" I looked toward the kitchen. Jason was standing there watching us. He said nothing. "I'll see you soon," I told her. Then I walked out. I made it as far as a speedway off Meridian before I had to stop for gas. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my credit card between the driver's seat and the console. I sat there for a minute with both hands on the steering wheel. That was when it hit me. Brittany hadn't hurt me nearly as much as Jason had. That night, I checked into a Hampton Inn. At 10:47, Jason texted me, "When you calm down, you can come back. But you owe Brittany an apology." I read it twice. Then I opened my banking app because the hotel had just put a temporary charge on my card. And there it was, a scheduled transfer for Monday morning. $1,886.32. Jason Mercer household. I stared at the number. Then I heard Brittany's voice in my head. "You live here for free." I leaned back against the hotel pillow. "Do I?" I said out loud. The next morning, I met Denise at a Bob Evans off North Shadeland Avenue. She was already in a booth when I got there, stirring half and half into her coffee and watching me come through the door like she could tell from 20 feet away that I hadn't slept much. "You look terrible," she said. "Good morning to you, too." That was me being gentle. I slid into the booth across from her and put my old spiral notebook on the table. Denise had worked with me in payroll for almost 20 years before we both retired. She was the kind of friend who didn't confuse kindness with politeness. She pulled the notebook toward herself. "What's this?" "My expenses." "You still write everything down?" "Some of us survived before apps." She gave me a look. "Some of us survived disco, too. Doesn't mean we should bring it back." That got a laugh out of me. A small one, but I needed it. Then Denise started reading. 1486.32. Part of Jason and Brittany's mortgage. Her eyes lifted. "Every month?" I nodded. She looked back down. 420. Sophie's after-school program. Another line. Family phone plan? Yes. Groceries? Sometimes. She flipped back a page. $2,700? Their furnace quit last winter. Denise stopped. She set the notebook flat on the table and stared at me. "Linda." "What?" "You are not living with them for free." I looked toward the window. Traffic moved steadily along the road outside. Denise tapped the notebook with one finger. "They're living with you on installment." I laughed again, but this time it hurt a little, because once she said it that way, I couldn't unsee it. 3 years earlier, when Jason and Brittany bought the house in Carmel, Frank had already been gone for 4 years. The market was crazy then. They found a house they loved and were short on the down payment. Jason called me one evening and said, "Mom, we can make the mortgage. We just need help getting in the door." I gave them $85,000, a gift, no contract, no secret ownership, no strings. At least that's what I told myself. Part of that money came from what was left after Frank's share of his electrical business was sold. Frank had worked 32 years in that trade. He came home most nights smelling like dust, insulation, and whatever building he'd been crawling around inside. More than once, he showed me a new cut on his hand while I was making dinner and said, "Don't worry, looks worse than it is." I remember one night, near the end of his working years, he was sitting at our kitchen table with 2 scraped knuckles and a heating pad behind his back. He said, "At least Jason won't have to work this hard forever." That memory sat differently with me now. $85,000 had sounded like a number when I wrote the check. That morning at Bob Evans, it felt like 30 years of Frank coming home tired. Denise must have seen my face change. "You okay?" "Yeah." "No, you're not." I wrapped both hands around my coffee. I wanted to help him. I know. He was having a rough year. I know that too. After Jason lost his operations job, I agreed to help for 6 months, just until he got settled. 6 months became 8, then 12, then 17. There was always a reason: a car repair, a school expense, a medical deductible. I never really added it up because Jason was my son and Sophie was my granddaughter. Family didn't feel like accounting, at least not until someone told you to clean their shoes. Denise flipped another page. "When was the last time he paid you back?" I opened my mouth. then closed it. I genuinely couldn't remember. That embarrassed me more than I expected. Denise didn't say anything for a moment. Then she pushed the notebook back. I'm not telling you what to do. That's a first. I'm serious, but I am asking you one thing. What? Why are you the only person in that house who's required to be understanding? I didn't have an answer. Later that afternoon, I called Raymond Cole. Raymond had been Frank's accountant for years, then mine after Frank died. He was 66, wore the same style of wire-rim glasses he'd worn since the Clinton administration, and believed emotional decisions should be delayed until after lunch. We met at his office near Keystone. I told him everything, not just the shoes, the transfers, the house, the bills. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "First, we separate what you owe from what you've chosen to pay." That calmed me down. He wasn't telling me to punish anybody. He was telling me to get clear. We went through everything. Bills in my name stayed mine. Anything legally connected to me got paid. Sophie's education savings stayed untouched. But voluntary support for Jason and Brittany, that was different. I don't want Sophie hurt, I said. Raymond nodded. Then don't hurt Sophie. But that doesn't mean you have to subsidize 2 grown adults indefinitely. I was still uneasy. What if they lose the house? Linda, boundaries are not the same as sabotage. I looked down at my hands. That was exactly what I was afraid of becoming. Then Raymond turned back to his computer. He frowned. How much have you transferred to Jason outside the regular monthly payments? I don't know, 10, maybe 11,000? He was quiet. Then he turned the monitor toward me. It's a little over 26. I stared at the screen. No, he scrolled. Some transfers I remembered. 1,000 for a car repair, 2,000 for property taxes, another emergency payment. Then one line stopped me cold. Mercer Home Emergency, $7,500, I pointed at it. What is that? Raymond looked at me. You tell me. I've never seen it before. He leaned back. Did Jason still have authorization on this account? And then I remembered. Years earlier, when Frank was sick, I had added Jason so he could help if I was at the hospital, or too overwhelmed to handle bills. I had never taken him off. Raymond folded his hands. Then before we use words like theft, we need to establish exactly what happened. I kept staring at the screen. There was no $7,500 emergency. Raymond nodded slowly. Then we find out what there was. The bank appointment took 40 minutes. That was all. 40 minutes to remove Jason's access from an account I'd trusted him with for years. I expected to feel relieved when the banker confirmed it was done. Instead, I felt sick. The woman helping me was probably in her early 30s. Nice enough, efficient. She clicked through a few screens, printed 2 pages, and slid them across the desk. His authorization has been removed, she said. Anything else you'd like us to review? I almost said no. Then I thought about that $7,500 transfer. Actually, I said, yes. By noon, Raymond had the statements. By Monday afternoon, the calls started. The first one was Jason, then another, then Brittany. I let them go to voicemail. At 4:18, Jason left a message. Mom, call me. There's some issue with the mortgage transfer. That was all. No apology, no mention of what happened in the kitchen, just the mortgage. Tuesday morning, my phone rang while I was brushing my teeth. Jason again, then Brittany, then Jason. By lunch, Brittany had changed tactics. Linda, you can't just change financial arrangements without warning. Financial arrangements. I stood there in the hotel room with the phone in my hand thinking, that's an interesting way to describe my money. By Wednesday, Brittany's mother started calling too. I had met Carol maybe a dozen times over the years. She usually sent me Christmas cards with glitter on them and signed everything love and blessings. Her voicemail that morning was less festive. Linda, whatever disagreement you're having with the kids, you need to think about Sophie. That one landed. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed for a long time. Sophie hadn't done anything wrong. That was the part that kept pulling at me. Every instinct I had as a mother and grandmother said, fix it, send the money, make sure the lights stay on. Make sure Sophie doesn't hear adults whispering about bills. I actually opened my banking app. Then I stopped. Because I realized something. I had been fixing things for Jason for years, and somehow he had learned to treat my fixing as part of the natural order. So I closed the app. By Thursday afternoon, the little red number over my missed calls said 32. They weren't all from Jason. Some were Brittany. 3 were Carol. One came from Jason's phone at 2:11 in the morning. The messages got less polished as the days passed. "Mom, please call." Then, "The payment bounced." Then, "We need to figure this out today." And finally, Brittany, "You're putting Sophie at risk just because you're angry." I almost called after that one. Instead, I called Denise. She listened while I paced the hotel room. "What if they really can't make the mortgage?" I asked. "Then Jason needs to call his lender. What if Sophie has to move? Then 2 adults make adult decisions." "That sounds cold." "No, cold was throwing dirty shoes at your feet." I sat down. Denise softened. "Linda, helping Sophie doesn't require financing Brittany's lifestyle." That word caught my attention. Lifestyle. Because earlier that day, Raymond had found something. The $7,500 transfer had been made on a Thursday. 3 days later, Brittany posted photos from Chicago. I hadn't seen them at the time. I wasn't on Facebook much. Denise pulled them up on her phone while we were having coffee in the hotel lobby. First photo, Brittany on a rooftop with a cocktail. Second, Jason outside a steakhouse. Third, shopping bags on a hotel bed. Then Denise stopped scrolling. "Well, I'll be damned." "What?" She turned the phone toward me. Brittany was standing in front of a mirror wearing a camel-colored coat, sunglasses, and a pair of cream designer sneakers. The shoes, those shoes. Denise zoomed in. $7,500 and she bought white shoes? I started laughing. I didn't mean to, it just came out. I laughed so hard I had to put my coffee down. Denise started laughing too. For maybe 30 seconds, the whole thing was absurd instead of painful. Then I looked at the picture again, and the laugh disappeared. That evening, someone knocked on my hotel room door. It was Jason. He looked terrible. Wrinkled polo shirt, stubble, dark circles under his eyes. For 1 second, I saw him at 12 years old again, standing in my kitchen after breaking a neighbor's window with a baseball. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He sat in the desk chair. I stayed near the bed. Neither of us spoke at first. Finally, he said, "I used some of the money." I nodded. "How much?" "I don't know exactly." "That's not an answer." He looked down. "I was going to replace it." "With what?" That was when the truth finally started coming out. He had lost his job 6 months earlier, not recently, 6 months. He had been interviewing for a regional operations director position in Plainfield. 2 interviews. Then a 3rd conversation with a recruiter. "They made it sound like I had it," he said. "So you borrowed from me?" "I thought there'd be a signing bonus." "And when you didn't get the job?" His face tightened. "I got the rejection email 2 weeks later." "What did you do then?" He said nothing. That told me enough. One withdrawal had become another, then another. He hadn't told me. At first, he hadn't even told Brittany. "Why?" I asked. "Why wouldn't you tell me you lost your job?" He looked at me then. "Because I couldn't stand you knowing." I honestly didn't understand. "I'm your mother." "That's the problem." He rubbed both hands over his face. "Every time you paid for something, I felt like a failure. And every time I saw you, I knew you knew I needed help. I never said that." "You didn't have to." For the first time, I saw something underneath his anger. Shame, real shame. And for a moment, I softened. Then Jason said, "If you turn the transfers back on for 60 days, I can fix this." There it was, not an apology, a request. I stared at him. "Jason, where did the rest of the $26,000 go?" He looked toward the window. "I didn't take all of it." "Did Brittany?" He swallowed. "You need to ask her." After he left, I sat in the quiet hotel room for 10 minutes. Then my phone lit up. Facebook, a post from Brittany. No names, just one sentence. "It's heartbreaking when someone you love starts changing and refuses to accept help." Underneath it, "Praying for your family." Getting older can be hard on everyone. I read those comments twice, then I understood. This wasn't just about money anymore. Brittany was getting everyone ready to believe I was losing my mind. Brittany's Facebook post bothered me more than I wanted to admit. The shoes had been cruel. Jason telling me to leave had been worse, but this was different. When you're 61, people don't usually question whether you can tie your own shoes or find your way home. Not yet. But once somebody plants the idea that you're changing, ordinary mistakes start looking suspicious. Forget where you put your glasses. She's slipping. Mix up the date of an appointment. We should keep an eye on her. I'd watched it happen to other women. So when my cousin Elaine texted me the next morning, "Everything okay? Brittany seems worried about you." I felt my stomach drop. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Finally, I wrote, "I'm fine, Elaine. There's a financial disagreement being handled privately." Then I took screenshots of Brittany's post and every comment beneath it. And closed Facebook. Raymond had already recommended an attorney named Maria Alvarez, whose office was in a brick building on the north side of Indianapolis. She was 58, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had the kind of calm voice that made you feel foolish for panicking before she'd even said anything. I showed her the bank statements, then the Facebook post, then Jason's old account authorization. Maria read everything without much expression. Finally, she slid the papers into a neat stack. "First thing," she said, "someone calling you confused doesn't make you confused." I smiled despite myself. "Thank you." "Second, don't get into a Facebook fight." I wasn't planning to. Good. Because people who have records don't need to win arguments in comment sections. I liked her immediately. Maria's advice was surprisingly boring, which was exactly what I needed. Document everything. Don't publicly accuse anyone of stealing, don't threaten police, don't send angry texts. Ask for an accounting of the disputed withdrawals. Protect my accounts. That was it. No courtroom ambush, no dramatic legal trick, just paperwork. A few days later, Maria sent a formal letter requesting information about the transfers I hadn't authorized. That was when Brittany started making phone calls. I know because 2 relatives called me afterward. Her version was that I had always used money to control Jason. According to Brittany, I had never really accepted that my son was married now. I offered help, then held it over their heads whenever I didn't get my way. The worst part? There was just enough truth buried in there to make me question myself. I had helped too much. Jason had a problem, I fixed it. Car repair? I sent money. Unexpected deductible? I covered it. Sophie needed something? Grandma handled it. Had I made it too easy for him not to stand on his own? That evening, Denise brought takeout from Culver's to my hotel room. I told her what Brittany was saying. "Maybe she's right about one thing," I said. Denise stopped unwrapping her burger. "What thing?" "Maybe I did interfere too much." She thought about that. Then she said, "Okay." I looked at her. "Okay. You may have helped too much." I hadn't expected her to agree. She pointed a French fry at me. "But helping too much was your mistake. Taking money without asking was Jason's. Don't combine the two because it makes you feel better to blame yourself." That shut me up. 2 nights later, Sophie called me from her tablet. Her face appeared too close to the camera at first, mostly forehead and one eye. "Grandma," I laughed. "Back up, honey, I can see inside your nose." She giggled and adjusted the tablet. We talked about school. She showed me a drawing of a horse that looked more like a large dog, though I wisely kept that observation to myself. Then she got quiet. "Why don't you live here anymore?" My chest tightened. "My house is almost fixed." "But you could stay until then." I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups need a little space to work things out. "Are you mad at Dad?" I looked at her sweet little face. "That's grown-up stuff. You don't have to worry about it." After we hung up, I cried. Not dramatically. I just sat on the edge of that hotel bed and let the tears come. The next morning, I called Denise. "Maybe I should cover the mortgage for 3 more months." She was quiet. "Just until Jason gets a job," I added. "And then? Then he takes over. And if he doesn't?" I rubbed my forehead. "I don't know. That's the problem, Linda." A few days later, Jason texted me. "Sophie wants you at her birthday Saturday." I almost said no. Then an envelope arrived at the hotel. Inside was a handmade card in purple marker. Grandma, please come to my cake. Love, Sophie. That settled it. I'd go. I'd bring her present, smile for pictures, eat cake, and leave. No money talk, no confrontation. Friday evening, though, Raymond called. Jason contacted me today. I sat straighter. Why? There was a short pause. He asked what happens when one spouse has debts the other spouse doesn't know about. I felt a chill run through me. What did you tell him? To gather records before making accusations. Did he? I can't discuss what Jason showed me. Fair enough. Then Raymond added, but I think your son has finally started reading his own bank statements. The next afternoon, I drove up to Carmel with Sophie's present on the passenger seat. When I turned onto Jason's street, I slowed down. Cars lined both sides of the driveway. 12, maybe 13. I had expected a little birthday party. Instead, half the family seemed to be there. I carried Sophie's gift to the front door. Brittany opened it. She smiled, not warmly, more like someone who had been waiting for me to arrive. And right then, I knew I wasn't walking into just a birthday party. For the first 30 minutes, everybody pretended it was a normal birthday party. Sophie tore open presents in the living room while her cousins argued over balloons. There were 3 pizzas on the kitchen counter, a sheet cake from Costco, and enough soda to keep 12 children awake until Tuesday. I gave Sophie a beginner's art set. She wrapped both arms around me. You came. Of course I came. For a while, that was enough. I spoke to relatives. I ate half a slice of pepperoni pizza. I even complimented Brittany on the cake. Then, while Jason was carrying paper plates into the kitchen, Brittany set down her drink. Well, she'd said loudly, since everybody's here, maybe Linda can explain why she's trying to make her own son lose his house. Conversations stopped one by one. Jason froze. Brittany, don't, she ignored him. I think people deserve to know what's actually happening. I looked around. Aunt Elaine was there. Brittany's mother, Jason's uncle, 2 cousins. Suddenly, the Facebook comments made sense. She hadn't just invited family to Sophie's birthday. She'd assembled a jury. Brittany folded her arms. Linda promised to help us, then suddenly stopped paying bills because she got angry with me. That isn't what happened. She's been forgetting things lately. One day she says money is a gift. The next day she acts like she never agreed to anything. Elaine looked at me with genuine concern. That hurt more than Brittany's accusation. Jason stepped forward. Mom, just turn the transfers back on. We can handle everything else privately. I looked at him, then I reached into my purse. Maria had suggested I carry copies of the relevant statements in case Brittany continued making claims about my finances. They were inside a thin, white envelope. All right, I said. If we're discussing my money in front of everybody, let's at least get it right. I turned to Jason. Did I give you $85,000 toward this house? His face reddened. Yes. Did I ever ask for it back? No, I took out the statements. Over the last 17 months, I've also contributed more than $40,000 toward this household. Someone behind me said, 40,000. Brittany jumped in. You offered. Some of it, yes. She seemed surprised that I admitted that. I helped because Jason was struggling. What I did not agree to was money being taken from my account without asking. Brittany's expression changed. Then she did something smart. She didn't scream. She started crying. This, she said, wiping her cheek, is exactly what I've been talking about. I heard someone shift behind me. Every dollar comes with strings. She gives us money, then she gets to decide how we live. That's not true. Isn't it? You've never let Jason grow up. You need him dependent on you, so you always get a vote. That one landed. Because somewhere inside me was the uncomfortable question I'd already asked myself. Had I helped too much? Brittany saw my hesitation. Then she went for the place she knew would hurt most. You're willing to let your own granddaughter lose her home just to punish me? For a few seconds, nobody spoke. I could hear children laughing in the next room. I thought about Sophie's handmade card. I nearly put those statements back in my purse. Nearly. Then I said, Sophie is the reason I kept helping long after I should have stopped. Brittany shook her head. No, control is. Stop. Jason said it quietly. Brittany turned toward him. Jason? I said stop. The room changed. He looked at me. Mom didn't authorize all those withdrawals. Brittany went pale. Jason continued. I took money from her account. Nobody moved. I thought I'd replace it when I got the Plainfield job. I didn't get the job. I was embarrassed, so I kept lying. His uncle muttered something under his breath. Then Jason looked at Brittany. But I didn't take all of it. She stared at him. Don't do this. I went through our statements. Apparently, after contacting Raymond, Jason had spent 2 nights going through credit cards and bank records. There was debt he hadn't known existed. A separate credit card. Buy now, pay later purchases. The Chicago hotel, shopping, minimum payments made with money that had come from my account. I was keeping us afloat, Brittany said. By pretending we were rich? Jason asked. You were unemployed. Her voice finally rose. What was I supposed to tell people? That my husband couldn't find a job? That sentence hung there. And for the first time, I saw Jason flinch at something she said. A few relatives started looking at him sympathetically. I wasn't ready to let him hide there either. She lied to you, I said. You lied to me. Those are 2 separate problems. Jason lowered his eyes. I pulled out one final page. What was the $7,500 home emergency? Brittany shook her head. We had expenses. Jason looked at her. No, we didn't. I placed the transfer record beside printouts of messages and transaction dates connected to the Chicago weekend. Brittany snapped, You went through my life. No, I said. I went through my bank account. That quieted her. Then, incredibly, she tried to explain that some of the purchases were related to her real estate image, including the shoes. They were practically a business expense. From near the cake, Denise said, They weren't much of an investment in waterproofing. A couple of people laughed before they could stop themselves. Even I had to bite the inside of my cheek. Then I put everything back into the envelope. I'm done paying your household expenses. Jason looked up. What about Sophie? Her education account stays exactly where it is. I'm her grandmother. That hasn't changed. And if we can't keep the house? I looked around the kitchen I had helped them buy. Then you'll make the same choices everybody else has to make. Brittany's face hardened. Fine, go back to that little old house. Without us, you're going to end up alone. That hurt. She knew it would. I swallowed before answering. Maybe. Then I picked up my purse. But loneliness is cheaper than humiliation. I kissed Sophie goodbye and walked to my Subaru. Once the doors were closed, I cried. Not because I regretted what I'd done, because sometimes doing the necessary thing still costs you something. 2 weeks passed. Then Jason called. I watched his name on the screen through 2 rings before answering. Hi. His voice sounded tired. Mom, I'm not calling for money. I waited. Then he said, Brittany moved out. Brittany moving out didn't magically fix anything. I think that matters. In stories, people sometimes expect one big confrontation to straighten everybody out. Real families don't work that way. Brittany took Sophie and stayed with her mother for a while. Jason remained in the Carmel house, although keeping it suddenly became a serious question instead of something I was expected to solve. He and Brittany started counseling. I stayed out of it. That was harder than it sounds. For most of my adult life, if Jason had a problem, some part of my brain immediately started searching for a solution. Money, advice, a phone call, a casserole, anything. This time I let him have his problem. About a month later, he accepted a logistics position in Plainfield. It wasn't the regional director job he'd wanted. The salary was considerably lower than what he'd made before. He called after his first week. I used to supervise guys making what I make now. I was sitting at my kitchen table sorting mail. Then you'll know how to treat your supervisor. There was silence. Then he laughed. A real laugh. Okay, Mom, I deserved that. What I didn't do was offer to make up the difference in his salary. Jason started selling things. A high-end grill, some electronics. Brittany listed several designer pieces online. They talked about selling the house and moving somewhere smaller. Those weren't punishments I created. They were simply what happened when their income finally had to match their lifestyle. Brittany and I barely spoke. Then one afternoon I received a text from her. I was angry and embarrassed. "What I said to you was cruel. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a while. There were 100 things I could have written. Instead, "Thank you for saying that." And I left it there. Forgiving someone doesn't require pretending you suddenly trust them. By early summer, the repairs on my bungalow were finally finished. The first morning back, I unlocked the front door and stood there longer than necessary. My house looked small after Jason's place. The kitchen cabinets were 20 years old. The hallway floor still squeaked near the linen closet. In the garage, Frank's old workbench had a dent along one corner from a drill he dropped sometime around 2004. I ran my hand across it. "Still here," I said. I wasn't sure whether I meant the workbench, Frank, or myself. That first evening was strange. No Sophie running down the hall, no television upstairs, nobody asking what was for dinner. The silence felt enormous. I made scrambled eggs and toast and ate alone at the kitchen table. For about 10 minutes, I wondered whether Brittany had been right. Maybe this was what standing up for myself bought me. An empty house. Then I carried my coffee onto the back patio. A cardinal landed on the fence. Somebody 2 houses down was mowing their lawn, and for the first time in months, nobody in that house expected anything from me. The silence changed. It became peace. Jason came over a few weeks later. I was trying to drag a 40-pound bag of potting soil from the trunk when he pulled into the driveway. "Mom, seriously?" I had it. "You absolutely did not." He lifted the bag. "My knee is bad, my arms still work." "Great, you can open the door." That was more like the Jason I remembered. Later, we sat on the patio with iced tea. He kept turning his glass in his hands. Finally, he said, "I owe you an apology that doesn't have the word but in it." I waited. "I let Brittany humiliate you because I was ashamed of myself." He looked down. "You were helping me, and somehow that made me angry at you. You were the safest person to blame because I figured you'd always forgive me." That hurt, because it was probably the most truthful thing he'd said. "I do forgive you," I said. He nodded. "But you're never getting access to my bank accounts again." He gave a tired little smile. "Yeah, I figured." "Good." Then I hugged him. That was when I finally understood something I wish I'd learned 20 years earlier. Forgiveness and access are not the same thing. Sophie started spending every other Saturday with me again. We made pancakes, went to the library, walked through the Carmel Farmers Market when my knee cooperated. I never discussed her parents' problems with her. She was 9. None of that belonged on her shoulders. And slowly I started building a life that wasn't organized around fixing somebody else's. One Saturday, Denise and I went to a garden center. I found an Adirondack chair I loved. The price tag said $170. I could practically hear Frank. $180 for a chair that sits outside? I smiled. Denise noticed. "What?" "Frank would hate this chair." "Then you definitely need it." So I bought it. We put it under the maple tree in my backyard. That evening, I sat there with a glass of iced tea and watched the light disappear behind the houses. For most of my life, I thought loving your family meant stepping in, pay the bill, keep the peace. Swallow the insult because Thanksgiving was coming and nobody wanted another argument. But helping can quietly become expected. And expected can turn into entitlement before you even notice. I didn't destroy my son's marriage. I didn't take his house. I didn't need to punish anybody. I simply stopped paying for a life in which I wasn't respected. And once I stopped holding everybody up, they finally had to learn how to stand on their own. If you've ever had to set a boundary with someone you still loved, you know it doesn't always feel like winning. Sometimes it just feels necessary. If you've been there, I'd love to hear what finally made you say, enough.